Good evening, everyone. Fred Shropshire here with WCNC TV, joined by our Nate Morabito and also our special guest, Lucy Jordan, who is she's a broker with Keller Williams Realty University. And we've got a great story to talk about on all of our platforms this evening, about a story that's going to be in our 11 o'clock newscast. Nate, you've done a lot of digging and you've worked a lot on this story where you were shedding light on practices that we see common in terms of giving loans or denying loans to minorities for mortgages.
Yeah, so let's be real for a second. I have essentially had 4 mortgages in my young life, 2 homes and 2 refinances. And do you think once I ever worried about an underwriting risk for my loan about getting denied? No, because I come from a place of privilege. My family were able to send me to college, were able to give me a car. I didn't have very much student debt. I was set from the start. I had a head start. And what really, for me, was hard to see as a person who doesn't live this was the fact that the largest lenders in Charlotte, most of the largest lenders in Charlotte, this is based on federal data, deny Black applicants 2 to 3 times more often than white applicants. And it's nuanced, you know, it goes very deep. It goes back decades to the fact that why the system is the way it is. But through the process of my reporting, I connected with Lucy Jordan, who joins us here, who connected me with one of her clients, a woman that you'll see in our story tonight at 11, who just really is working her tail off, multiple jobs, barely getting any sleep every night to make sure she can overcome the challenges of the lending market, to make sure that she can buy a home. And like so many other Black men and women, she was denied a home mortgage, and she wasn't going to let that stop her. And I think our main point of having Lucy here tonight is we want to tell people that while the system certainly has room for reform, there are resources right now out there for people who are trying to get a home loan. And I wanted Lucy to kind of talk about that a little bit, because Lucy, you help people day in and day out, right, overcome these challenges.
I don't know if Lucy can hear us.
Yeah, while we wait to see if she can hear, we have some resources on our website for people. You know, anything from credit counseling to Community Link, which can help people with their credit, in addition to Habitat for Humanity, which can be a resource. And I think I listened to a congressional subcommittee hearing today where a big factor was the lack of access to assets for people of color, and how that has really set minorities back from the start. And Fred, I know you're passionate about this as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, we've done a lot of talking about this over the past several months, actually. Pride Magazine, a magazine that has been in Charlotte for a few decades at least, put on a Pride Awards ceremony just this past weekend where the wealth gap we've talked a lot about, and how there were certain programs, there were VA loans and certain things that were given to veterans, you know, after World War II and after the Korean War, and in that certain period of time where there was a boom of economic mobility for a lot of white America. There were neighborhoods and things that were built based on these loan programs, and there were areas, you know, we talk about redlining areas even in Charlotte, North Carolina today, and you see them across the country, where values haven't appreciated at the same rate, and people were locked out of generational wealth, you know, because when people get homes, it's like one of the vehicles that we talk about the American dream. You know, someone is able to get a home, and that home appreciates value, and some of the equity in that home may be passed forward to next generations. And that was something that, you know, we just haven't seen a lot of, in addition to other circumstances. We're just talking finances at this point.
Yeah, Lucy, I don't know if you can hear us now, but I wanted you to talk a little bit about how people can kind of work within the system that exists right now.
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. To a lot of clients who had a lot of, could be debt to income ratio or a lack of income. So I try to meet them where they are, and they're committed to the home ownership, then I'm willing to help them overcome any stumbling blocks that they may run into. So I start with education. I teach them about the importance of it and how to utilize it properly. So I have a little team, and so I have partners that I utilize, and also agencies in the Charlotte and surrounding areas that are willing to help people. It doesn't cost a thing. They're nonprofit, and they work with you to improve your business and to help guide you along the way.
And Fred, let me jump in just for a second.
We also work with program. Some of the organizations that I utilize are Community Link in Charlotte, Probably Unlimited with Louise Mack in Kannapolis, and also Operation Hope with Alicia Kinney out of Salisbury. And I can give you those links if you need them.
Yeah, and I think what you'll find here, and you can already start to see it a little bit in the comments, Fred, is that this is a sensitive topic, right? And people have strong opinions about this. But the fact of the matter is, the data show there are disparities, and there are disparities because this goes back many years and many decades. And I think what you'll see in our story tonight is no one is saying that borrowers don't need to do more. That is part of it. There needs to be more financial literacy. There needs to be more savings. Right? But when you are facing a system, as the president and CEO of Community Link, which Lucy just referenced, was designed for me, not for Fred or Lucy, but we treat each of us equally, even though our circumstances may be different and what we represent may be different based on our past. It really leads to an insurmountable challenge for many people. And I will tell you, of the people who marked their race on their home loans in 2018 and 2019 in Charlotte and the market as a whole, 13% went to Black men and women.
Yeah. I want to highlight a comment here from Esta Smith. She says, "Could it be they were not the best candidate for a loan? The loan business is just that, a business. You don't get special treatment because you are Black. Of course, the aid and the entity and generation of people who think they are privileged because of their color." It's very, I think there are nuances there that people don't understand because we don't understand the history of where this comes from, the origin. You use the word system. System implies that something is created a certain way. It's created, it's created a certain way. It's created for a certain purpose. And in this process and beginning to develop suburbia, in our country, I mean, there were areas of certain cities that were redlined. In other words, these are areas that you specifically could not build a home in. You would not be financed to put a home in a certain area. And perhaps we don't talk enough about that because people don't understand this issue. They don't understand there's an origin of it. And, there's certainly is a sensitive conversation because people don't necessarily want to be responsible. They don't want to feel responsible for something like this, but it really is something that we need to be talking about in this day and age because the residual effect of that is still with us today, which is why we see things happening today. You're talking about in your story how the percentage of Black applicants, what it is. I can personally tell you that when I fill out these applications, I don't even put a race on there. I purposely don't put certain things on an application because of the history that is there.
Yeah, and I think, when I talk to housing advocates, they are not saying that people who cannot repay a mortgage should be getting loans. That is not what they are saying. They are saying that there's a sensitivity in the risk process that you should consider certain circumstances that a Black applicant may have, that maybe the way they pay their rent is a better indicator for them. Maybe they make a rent payment, but something from their history about their credit is holding them back. And the woman in our story tonight, Shay, had a credit score that just wasn't good enough, and her debt to income ratio wasn't good enough. But she was able to work through that, right? But let me tell you about that woman. At the age of 18, she started taking care of her mother, who's in a wheelchair. She's now taking care of her deaf grandmother. She's the main breadwinner. She works multiple jobs. She has 2 kids of her own. And that generally is a different set of circumstances. Lucy, there are people that are going through this all the time, are they not?
Yeah, she has an amazing story that she was able to overcome that. You have to meet where they are, and if they're determined to become a homeowner, then I'm also determined to help them.
And I think what you find too is that there are a lot of people in this community who are trying to make a difference, both in the lending industry and the realty and advocacy, borrowers. But I asked Floyd Davis, who is the president and CEO of Community Link. This man marched in the 60s, okay, for civil rights. I asked him, isn't it frustrating that this is still the case? Because he says nothing has changed. And he said, you know what, Nate? He said it wasn't until last year that for the first time he really saw people who were not Black marching to represent Black lives. And that to him gave him hope. And I will tell you, you're going to have people who say, well, whether this isn't new or, this is propaganda or whatever you want to say about it. Right now, the federal government calls this, the oversight agency over mortgages calls this one of its 2 top priorities, racial equity, because this is a real issue. And there was a congressional hearing today about this specific issue, a bipartisan hearing. And I think that we often lose sight of the history, because the history is what brings us to today. There is a path forward, though, and that's what I think is so important here. I mean, it's just going to take everyone kind of coming together. And I think, again, no one is saying that people that cannot repay a mortgage should get a loan. But they are saying when you have an automated system that treats every person the same, it's a computer basically, it doesn't factor in socioeconomic disadvantage. And I'll tell you too, banks have more oversight than mortgage companies, right? So what you'll see if you go to WCNC.com right now, you're going to see the denial percentages for the largest lenders in Charlotte. And you will notice that the mortgage companies' denial percentages are lower, much lower in many cases. The disparities are still there.
Yeah.
Right? But the denial percentages for some of these banks are almost 50%. And they have very rigorous standards. And in part because of the housing collapse in 2008. Lending issues led to stiffer and tougher regulations, which I think for many people will say that makes it more difficult. And I was looking at the Urban Institute's recent study that found the Black-white home ownership gap reached its highest level in 50 years in 2018. Lucy, do you want to say anything else that kind of just can help us wrap this up here as we kind of look at, you say you have to meet someone where they are, right? We have a success story in Shay that we're going to show tonight.
Absolutely. I actually have several success stories. Shay is a good one because she did everything that she was told to do. She wants it. They have to be good, and there's a lot of obstacles. That's true. They can be overcome. If you really want it, you can do it. You just have to stay committed, and we will help you along the way. If I've helped many, and I continue to help people. If they really want it, they can do it.
And the key is you can't take no for an answer. You know, if you get denial, like this woman you're going to see at 11 did, she just turned up the heat even more. You know, for her, she was going to do it. She was determined to be able to get this home. And her home is beautiful. Let's hope it closes next month as expected, but it's beautiful. She was able to save up enough money for her own down payment. And I've got to tell you, these lenders, a lot of these banks in particular, have programs that can actually help with people's down payments. That can help with the closing costs. That can help lower interest rates. And I think that's one more thing that people need to remember. I mean, banks are really putting their money where their mouth is, trying to invest in this and trying to make a difference. But even with all of that effort, we're still at a point where most lenders deny Black applicants 2 to 3 times more often. And I'll close with this, Fred. Credit history is the #1 reason why Black applicants get denied. And you know what? There are a higher percentage, according to the data, of Black applicants denied for their credit history than white applicants denied for their credit history, which tells me that credit history is a bigger problem for the Black population in Charlotte. And what advocates say is that is because there are socioeconomic disadvantages that have carried over throughout time and throughout generations, that when they go to get a loan, they have that credit history issue that they can't really overcome without investing a lot of time. And I'm going to tell you this too, we're going to host a virtual town hall with several experts next week. It's going to be Tuesday at 9 p.m. We're going to have many different representatives. We're going to have a realtor. We're going to have Johnson C. Smith's going to be there. We are going to have a lender on, and we're going to talk about this. So we're going to talk about other solutions to this issue, because I think that in the end, you know, if Black lives matter, which they do, Black homeownership has to matter. That is one of the most critical paths to wealth. And I don't think anyone that we talked to for the story disputed that that needs to change, including the lenders. They agree over time that this needs to dissipate. It's going to take time, but we all have to agree from the get-go that this is a problem, right? This is a problem when it comes to wealth and when it comes to rising up.
Yeah, it's a compounding issue where there's a lot of history, and I appreciate you. And I know just from looking at some of the comments coming in, they are mixed, and this is a sensitive subject, but there are several people in the comments too who have said they appreciate you taking on such a subject. I'm sure it's something obviously that we're going to continue to talk about, and I'm looking forward to your town hall next week. But in the meantime, at 11 tonight, again, Nate Morbido has a story I think that is going to enlighten a bunch of people who have seen this or read about it, know about it personally, and those specifically who don't know a lot about this, definitely watch our story tonight at 11 o'clock. Also want to give a thank you to Lucy Jordan before we go. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your voice in this as well. Nate, always a pleasure. And thank all the folks out here on all of the platforms. We'll see you tonight at 11. Catch Nate's story then.